which is introducing mindful self-compassion. So this is just an introduction to it for the purposes of letting you know what it is, the kinds of things you would do in it, why it's helpful. This is a practice that I personally have and that I'm trained in from the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. I've done the supervision, etc., and I've worked with groups on this, both adults and children and teens. So I want to just introduce this to you. So Mindful Self-Compassion is a particular program. It's an evidence-based program. As a psychologist, it's really important to me that anything that I recommend, especially as therapeutic, is that there's an evidence base behind it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of places where you may go where people will say, do this or do that, or you might hear about it on the internet, and there may or may not be any evidence on it, or there may be evidence that it works when these things are in place, but not when this is in place, and the individuals providing that support maybe don't know that. So this is a program where there's very robust evidence, and I'm going to talk just a little bit, because not everyone wants to hear the research, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it, that it is effective when done with integrity. And what that means is, and whether it's mindful self-compassion or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or mindfulness-based stress reduction, those are three very rigorous, meaning research-based, evidence-based mindfulness practices. There's consistent components, which means there's been research done on it with control groups that indicate whether or not it's effective and what makes it effective. A huge variable is what kind of training that individual has. And so they're only deemed to be effective when provided by someone who has the required or necessary training that's recommended by the developers of that program. So keep that in mind. So this particular MSc program, we call it for short, was developed by Dr. Chris Germer and Dr. Kristin Neff. Chris Germer is a clinical psychologist who, has worked a lot in trauma and in other areas, but he has a lot of expertise in trauma. And Kristin Neff is a research educational psychologist who has worked primarily as an academic, but interesting component of her is that she has a son with autism. And if you Google her, you'll see her, and you can go to YouTube, etc., and look for this. And she talks about, and she also has in her book reference to experiencing the diagnosis of her son with ASD and how that impacted her and how she benefited herself from using mindful self-compassion in this regard. So I think that's actually very nice extra component. This wasn't developed for individuals with ASD or their families in particular. It was developed to support individuals who in particular are giving out a lot of compassion potentially to others but not to themselves. So here's a bit of the research, and if you go to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, so the website is centerformsc.org, you can access the research there, as well as I've given you at the end Kristin Neff's website, because she's primarily does research, and there's tons of it there, and other places, but those are places to start. So what we know, and there's been various levels of research, and I won't get into the nitty-gritty of that, but not just correlational. There's correlational research, meaning when you have greater self-compassion, you have greater happiness, for example, but there's also outcomes. So this is considered an evidence-based treatment, meaning you start off and you're not doing it, you get the treatment, you learn how to do it, and then you change at the end. So that's what I'm citing here. So it increases positive emotions, so emotions such as happiness and optimism. It increases social connectivity, which is quite interesting because in the program, we don't talk about, okay, now go and phone up people that you know or something. But the experience of learning mindful self-compassion has led to increases in people being more connected with others and reporting that. It improves social awareness and regulation, a huge thing, because as I've mentioned with the compassion fatigue, with the burnout, etc., that's primarily caused by not being able to regulate that empathy that causes distressing emotions. So it increases your awareness of emotion and your ability to regulate it. For me, that was one of the huge learnings for me, how helpful that was. It increases health and physical wellness. And again, that's not a target of the program. They don't say, okay, track your diet this week. What are you eating? They don't do any of that, but it leads to that. And the hypothesis is because you're becoming more aware of your needs and taking care of yourself, people start to do that. Another really important one, and Kristin Neff talks about this in one of her articles related to parents who have children with autism, is it increases their agency and goal re-engagement. So if you're a parent or a professional and you have goals and I talked about the yin and the yang of mindfulness. So you're out there doing things and supporting your child or supporting whoever it is, and you start to get fatigued by that, you disengage. Well, MSC actually increases that agency. So it's not just all about, I need to look after myself and go take a bubble bath. It's about replenishing yourself. And then when your cup is filled up a bit more, then you can go out. So I personally think that's great because for me, a real value of mine is engagement. It is achievement. It is doing things. So I don't want to just, hide away and, and be in a bubble bath and then, sink under it or something. I want to be able to get out there. So I think that's actually very awesome research or finding. It decreases emotional and behavioral reactivity. And so what that means, and it's a big focus, and this happens in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy as well. And I have done a group on that with several groups, but one was with adults with ASD, and I received a lot of feedback from those adults saying, now I notice when my emotions are getting out of control. And one guy said something like, now instead of, and he mentioned waiting for his brother to pick him up at the bus stop. He said, and now instead of yelling and screaming and sending him nasty text messages and stomping my feet and thinking about how I was going to punish him when I arrived, now I breathe, and now I think about, maybe he's stuck in traffic. Maybe I can do this to calm down for when I'm waiting. So rather than just having the emotion and reacting impulsively, which we all can do, it helps us to decrease that reactivity. Like, I'm feeling this, I'm going to do that. And it decreases feelings of stress, anxiety, self-criticism, and shame. And so Kristin and also Dr. Wong, who wrote the article on stigma and shame, talked about the use of mindful self-compassion as supporting parents who are feeling that self-criticism and shame, because there's a huge focus on MSC on exactly that, on dealing with shame. Okay, so in MSC, what will you learn? These are things you learn from the research, but also just from the intentions of the practice. So you learn how to evoke goodwill and kindness towards yourself, especially when you are suffering. So how do you do this? How to stop being so hard on yourself. I don't know if any of you guys are hard on yourself. Anyone out there harder on themselves? On occasion, right? Like, you idiot. Why did you make that PowerPoint look like that? It should have looked like this, Why didn't you think about this? Where's your phone charger? You're so stupid. I don't know if any of you ever talk that way. When you talk that way, that's your inner critic, and it can beat you up worse than any outer critic. So you learn to identify that self-critic and to tame it. Stop being hard on yourself. Like, yeah, Georgina, you had a lot to manage and a lot of things to organize in order to get here, and you had your phone charger out, and it's not surprising that you forgot it given everything else that you had to do. I wonder if someone else might have a charger that I could borrow. And guess what? Deborah did. And so it's all good. I didn't melt down, even though I started escalating. How to handle difficult situations and emotions with greater ease. So that's that idea of emotional equanimity. And it took me some time to get myself around that idea. And I may or may not explain it well, but it has to do with you're still experiencing the emotion. So you're not pushing it away or pushing it down, which is something I used to like to do a lot, even though I wasn't very convincing because I'd still be acting, weird. it's there, but there's an analogy, and Mark Williams talks about this, or I actually had training from Mark Williams, who's one of the authors of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and he's out of the University of Oxford. I spent a whole day with him, not just by myself, which was, disappointing. There were like hundreds of other people there, but he talked about this idea of when your emotions are coming, think of it as there's a waterfall, and you're actually standing behind that waterfall. So they're there, but you're not right underneath the waterfall with them bashing into your head, okay? How to respond with awareness rather than reacting impulsively, and how to motivate yourself with encouragement rather than criticism. So it's not all about, and there's a false belief that, oh, well, I'm just going to become lazy, I'm never going to do anything, right? Because the reason lots of people give for criticizing themselves is they want to be better. That's what I would say to myself. We've often grown up with that and heard it from teachers and parents and others, come on, you can do better than that, pick yourself up, don't be lazy, don't be this. And rather than saying, gee, what do you need so that you can do that, is much more motivating and effective. So there are 3 components to mindful self-compassion, and here's what they are in brief, and I'm going to say a bit more about it after the break. So mindfulness. So I want to lead you through just doing a couple of things with your hands here, so if you guys can follow me. So start by clenching your fists really, really tight. Clench your fists. Come on, Stephanie. There, come on, you got to do it tight there now. So that even the camera guy's doing. Awesome. How about the technical guy? Come on. No, his fists clenched. He's already chilled. Okay, so this represents resistance. So when bad stuff's happening and we're resisting it, that's what it feels like. Doesn't feel good. We're holding it in. Mindfulness is open up your hands now, open up your palms, right? So you're letting it out. It's still here. So that's all, it's all still in the room, right? Whatever is happening was already here, is something you say in mindfulness. It's not like, oh, just by recognizing it, all of a sudden flew in the room. No, it was already here, so now you're just aware of it. It's open. And now take one hand, put it over your chest, and the other hand on top. So it's that U-turn. Or if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, you can, we go through this in the practice, you can put it anywhere else that seems soothing. So some people just kind of hold their arm or rub their hands together. But that represents the kindness, the self-kindness, where you're giving back to yourself, kindness. And now take your hands and put them out and kind of wrap them around a little bit. Okay. Now what that represents is common humanity. It's kind of like if we weren't in COVID and we could give each other a big hug, right? To me, it also feels like it can get a little bit painful if you keep there for too long. So there's pressure in that. But that's okay because everybody within that circle is experiencing the same thing. So those are the 3 components. And I'm just going to finish with this. So when I was doing my first MSc training, I actually did in Wales at the University of Bangor, where they have a huge mindfulness and mindfulness-based interventions are very prevalent in the UK because they're funded by the NHS, the National Health System, as frontline interventions for things like anxiety and depression, and we know from the research are as, if not more effective than medication. So I took my first training there and had really awesome teachers. Ali Lambert was one of them. And she drew a picture, and I couldn't draw the same picture, but it really resonated with me. And so first she drew clouds, storm clouds and rain coming down. And she said, those are the tears of suffering. And then we take those tears of suffering and we add the layer of self-kindness to it. And when we do that, and she drew the sun, that's the sunshine of kindness shining on those tears of suffering, which is self-compassion. And you have a rainbow. Without that storm and the kindness of self-compassion, there's no rainbow. So that's really stuck with me as an image representing mindful self-compassion.